there's been an inexorable influence now upon the way in which I do that theology. It's now all done within the tradition. You know, it was all a chance encounter, really. I mean, I was a junior member on a faculty at, I was adjunct. I didn't even have a full position. Yet one of the things that I had to do was do what everybody else never had time to do. And one of the things I didn't have time to do was review a book that got thrown on my desk, and I was requested to volunteer to review the book, if you understand what that means. And so...
I never do that for my
Yeah, I know. Well, my dean did it to me. And he said, you know, I need it for the journal in a month. So, and I was just editing my PhD to go off for publication at that time. And so I had to put that aside, and I read this book, and I was kind of upset about it. And then as I'm reading the book, all of a sudden, I'm beginning to realize that this thing is not just a book about religion. This is what I would place in the series of classic text. As a matter of fact, in the review, I said this is a book akin to Frederick Schleiermacher's book, Speeches on Religion to its Cultured Despisers, or Immanuel Kant's amazing book, Religion Within the Limits of Reason Alone. This was the order of magnitude of this book on religion. So deep was its capacity to grasp the essential concept. So I just wrote this in my review. I offered, you know, some necessary Protestant responses, but I just let it float out there in cyberspace. It got published in the Msgr Journal of Theology and Ministry. And then John Zucchi, who was the translator and editor for Religious Sense when it first came out in English with McGill Queen's University Press, came across the review about a year after it was published. So I think this was like around 2000, something like that. And he said, you got him. You've figured Giussani out more than most of the reviews that I've read. We'd like you to come to McGill. And of course, anybody who knows John Zucchi knows that means that somewhere in the next 3 years this is going to happen. And as a matter of fact, it did take a year and a bit before I went to McGill. But when I was at McGill, there were several people from Italy there, representatives of Meeting Rimini, and I presented a full dress treatment of, by then, Giussani's trilogy, Religious Sense at the Origins of the Christian Claim and Why the Church, and presented that next to Archbishop, at the time he was Bishop Prendergast, he's now Archbishop Prendergast, and then Margaret Langholm. She was professor at a university there. Anyway, short story is that they liked the presentation so much they invited me to Rimini in 2003. And while I was in Rimini in 2003, I expressed a desire to meet Father Giussani. And while I was there in late August, to my amazement, to my utter amazement, it happened. And we had a very long conversation, a meal together, a very deep sharing together. I mean, there were so many things that happened at that time. And maybe when we have individual conversations this week, I'll have an opportunity to share with you some of those things. But suffice to say that nothing's been the same since. I got on this ecumenical train at that point in time, and I'm still on it. And I haven't been asked to get off, and since I like the ride, I'm not going to jump off on my own accord. There you go.
Thank you. And Dr. Aquila, I'm curious about this perspective. I mean, there are a lot of details that I wish I could touch upon, but just for the sake of time, I'm curious, this whole topic of ecumenism and the contribution of Giussani, what, if any, impact does this have on the work of a Catholic university in terms of, one, its identity, and also its maybe challenges and also opportunities when you're dealing with a diverse student body?
Well, the diversity of our student body extends not only, we have, of course, have Catholic students, we have non-Catholic Christians, we also have Muslim students and students of other faiths. So the purpose of a Catholic university is of course, to welcome everyone. We have a strong commitment to a Catholic identity. We make that very clear. We follow the tenets of Ex Corde Ecclesiae. But what I have found, what students appreciate who come to St. Thomas, who are not Catholic, is it becomes a very safe space to explore ultimate questions without feeling like, well, their experiences that some have told me, and I could see this happening elsewhere too, is that in non-faith-based institutions, when you get to the threshold of ultimate questions, you have to shut it down because of, especially increasingly so, strict separation between religion and what you can talk about in a public university. On the other hand, there are certain faith-based institutions where they confuse church and university means proselytization. And that's not a university. A university is a free engagement of ideas where everyone knows this is a Catholic university. And if you come here and you want to deepen your Catholic faith, you will get to deepen that Catholic faith. If you come here without, with questions on your mind, you will have an opportunity to exchange in free discourse without feeling that you're going to be, that's a proselytization. And I think that's, again, the genius of Giussani. As my good friend Angela, who heads Crossroads in New York, says, you know, we talked about doing a special Crossroads event on education. She says, what are you talking about? The CL is nothing but education. Right. In order to do something, you have to experience the movement. And this was foundational to Giussani's, because he encountered people at that moment of experience, you know, and through an accompaniment, as John Paul II would say, bring them to a place where they would appreciate whatever it is, if they're seeing the beauty of the Catholic Church, to see that. If not, there's a certain sense where our job as a university is to, once people start on the search and the journey, to be authentic about it and let the truth lead them where it has to, and be authentic about that, and sort of remove the obstacles that prevent them from going to where the truth inevitably leads.
Thank you. And then finally, question to both of you. We speak about ecumenism and dialogue between Catholic, Protestant. Could this, or how could this apply to perhaps dialogue with other religions, even Muslims, Hindus, and even further beyond that, agnostics and atheists?
Well, I mean, I think that the three touchstones that I focused on were specifically grounded in an ontological, what I would call an ontological understanding of the greater humanum. That has to be our touchstone, and to the degree that every human individual has this capacity to know God, to share God, to love God, we have not only a place for us to listen, but a place for us to speak. And I think that has to be the fun. And this is about us returning to our Christian roots, you see. It's about, as you say, it's about us returning to an understanding of what our experience of God has been within community of faith. So we have to find ways to open up the dialogue between East and West. I mean, I mentioned East and West tonight, or rather, East and West was mentioned in the Lindbeck article, and I think he's absolutely right. I mean, especially there's lots of room for us to open up on that side, but with folks from the Buddhist faith, Muslim faith, the axial religions, so-called Hinduism. My goodness, I think there's so much that we can reach out with from the point of view of our own nature, our own humanum. That's what I like about Giussani. Giussani will speak about his Catholic faith, and he'll speak about religion in Catholic terms, but he also makes it clear that there's something about anthropology that transcends the normal categories in which we conceive of that in our theological ways. And we have to get in touch with that reality. Get in touch with our humanity. Absolutely.
vantage point of a university, especially a Catholic university, we celebrate the integration and complementarity of faith and reason. And it's our job now not only to give clarity about the Catholic faith, but it's our job to rehabilitate reason.
Mm-hmm.
And this was something that John Paul II insisted on,
And
Benedict, and even Pope Francis. But I think Giussani gives us the key to that, where he opens up the religious sense is irreducible, part of being human.
That's right.
And certain conceptions of reason would that's even inadmissible in the conversation. So to be able to talk about reason in a way that brings it back into the conversation, the public conversation, legitimizes that, and then from there, if you walk with Giussani, you see, if you really see what reason really is, the totality of taking in reality, you will know that reason will take you to the threshold where it can go no longer, and there opens up the horizon of faith. So, and then, the great trilogy that, religious sense, the origin of the Christian claim, why the church. If you walk carefully through those three texts, you find yourself, and you're open to the truth, you will find yourself understanding why Christianity can make the claims it can, why the church is necessary, even for someone like Sheila.
It's interesting. It's interesting because in religious sense, he introduces you to the fundamental religious nature of humanity. In Origins, the Christian claim, he introduces you to its fundamental fulfillment in Jesus Christ. And in Why the Church, he introduces you to its continued existence in the world. It's a very beautiful way to think about that progression.
And we want to open it up to questions from the audience.
One could dialogue for centuries about the rules of arithmetic, and it's very difficult to change those. Along those lines, your approach seems to be to find commonality amongst Christians and to presume that we are really not that different after all, when in fact there are very big differences. Should the emphasis not necessarily be on commonality, but on knowledge, respect, and just tolerance? Just agreeing to disagree, that we're very different, but I can live with you.
Yeah. Actually, I think if you read, and I'll be making this available in different ways, if you read it very closely, it's actually, that's the old form of ecumenism that I don't think works.